Greater Phoenix. We can tell our story differently. A new perspective. A different look. Greater Phoenix A to Z.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Greater Phoenix A to Z podcast. I'm your host, Tim Bourcet. Today's episode is a great one that highlights what I consider to be one of Greater Phoenix's biggest selling points, its food and restaurant scene. And we are joined by the great Steve Chucri, the president and CEO of Arizona Restaurant Association, a Mesa native. Steve is no stranger to the GPEC network as a former board member, former county supervisor, and since 2002 has served as the president and CEO of the Arizona Restaurant Association. Steve, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself for all those who may not know you, which I don't think is that many, but just in case, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Tim, first and foremost, as a former GPEC board member, I always hold GPEC and your whole team in high regard. You're still one of the most handsome bald men I know. So let's get the story straight as we start. But
if you could endorse me on LinkedIn with that, Steve, that would be great.
So that all being said, I love your intro in regards to what the restaurant industry means. And I didn't come from it, but I certainly came from a grandfather on my maternal side who was an immigrant to this country from Lebanon, and a father who was a direct immigrant from Beirut, Lebanon himself. So it's an oddity, but yeah, I'm a first generation American, third generation Arizonan, but born and raised in Arizona. And I've loved doing this job, as you said, since 2002. Love my time on the county board for nearly a decade, and I'm blessed with a wife that I've been together with now for almost 30 years, and two boys, one in college now, a sophomore in college and a sophomore at Brophy. So all in all, I feel older, but I am certainly blessed to not only be in this industry, but more importantly, to have the family that I have and the friends.
Love it, Steve. Great story. That's a story of America right there. So you've been in this role now for 20 plus years on the restaurant side. So we're going to kind of open this up big picture because it has shifted significantly. What have been the biggest changes you've seen in the Arizona food scene over this time?
Well, it's ironic and poignant that you asked the question. I just had lunch with one of our mayors of one of our largest cities in the state, and we were talking about this very thing. And Tim, you'd get a kick out of this, and that, I've said for many decades growing up here in Arizona, we had two kinds of food. We had Mexican food, and then we had a different kind of Mexican food. The culinary diversity of Arizona is unparalleled to whatever it's been before. And so 15 years ago, if you were to ask me, how would you and what defines the restaurant industry, I would have told you at that time that we are simply an extension of your kitchen. Fast forward 5 to 7 years, I would then tell you we're actually an extension of your dining room. Today, I would share with you that we are a lifestyle. We are a lifestyle. Restaurants touch your lives each and every day. And more recently, post-COVID, even though this has nothing to do, in my humble opinion, having to do with COVID, the past 2 years, restaurant sales in the States have outperformed grocery store sales by more than 20%. So when you take those factors, when you take that stunning, if you ask me, statistic as to what we mean by way of convenience and importance to your daily life, you take the fact that restaurants in America are the most trusted industry in the United States. It used to be technology for many years. We took the number one spot a couple of years ago. That we are a part of your lifestyle, and that's how I came to that terminology. And then, if you zero down even more so here in Arizona for what we mean as an economy, and I certainly know GPEC and your viewers/listeners of this podcast can appreciate it, that restaurants in Arizona in 2024, by year end, we expect those sales to be about $23 billion.
That was billion with a B?
B with a B. And our budget just passed at $16 billion.
Tells you everything you need to know right there.
And so when you look at that number, when you look at the fact that we employ 265,000 people, that our daily payroll without tips no, not including tips, is over $20 million per day is what our payroll is. That we're a force, right? We're an economic force. And then you uh, push that into and dovetail that into the culinary scene, Tim, to what your original question was. And we've got now James Beard Award winning chefs, nominees in this state. We've got the culinary diversity that we've never had before, not just by way of maybe an Eastern Indian restaurant versus a Thai restaurant versus another type of sushi restaurant, but even existing restaurants have such a diversity in their own menus in and of themselves, which that speaks to success, and that speaks to Arizona needing to make sure we're listening to our consumer in the melting pot of people we have, not necessarily from a cultural standpoint, but from a geographic standpoint. Of so many people moving to Arizona, you're getting a little flavor of multiple parts of our country. And I think that's really buoyed restaurants and kept them going, but also is a part of our success.
Absolutely. And I'd like to expand, you just talked about some of the award winning chefs and nominated. And, when we were discussing this podcast, the development of this food scene has been massive as of late. And again, now we're seeing numerous local chefs, restaurants being nominated and winning. Can you highlight a few of those? I know there's been Tacos Chivas and Bianco, and there's a variety of them, but can you just highlight a few to really show, how this market is winning and getting that national, international exposure?
Yeah, I mean, you've got F&B, you've got Stephen, who was former with the Lard in the Delta. Now he's taking over Binkley's restaurant. Of course, you've got Bianco. You've got rising stars like Chris Collins, who won't consider himself a rising star, but Chris is so young that I believe Chris has just not only done an amazing job as a chef, Tim, but he's also, you got to remember, you can't just be a chef. You've got to be a businesswoman or businessman, right? Chris has done a great job in coming up with multiple concepts as an independent and growing those concepts. Of course, Sam Fox, I think, is always upping his own game, and he's challenging himself to do more and bigger and better things. And you see that with the global ambassador and the restaurants going in there. You see more recently what he's trying to accomplish with the Arizona Cardinals, I think, with a different type of atmosphere. Again, all of these things are speaking to the lifestyle. But what's equally important as those award-winning chefs and talent that we see in the culinary industry here in Arizona, I think it's also important to look at those types of restaurants that are coming and choosing to come to Arizona that have started in other states. And let me give you a good example of that. Maple and Ash. Maple and Ash is a restaurant based in Chicago. And this was their first footprint outside of Chicago, right? A major metropolitan city was Arizona. And they're doing very, very well. You see the Mastro family that has not only created Mastros and then sold it, but now they have State 44 and outside the state, State 48 and Ocean 44 and Ocean 48. Just another celebration of a restaurant concept and a restaurant family really based and anchored here in Arizona that's going outside of the state and exporting our talent and exporting the good name of Arizona, which is a success that is hard to achieve. I'll put it that way. I'll say it's not like you don't see it elsewhere. You do, but it's very hard to achieve.
Absolutely. And that's great. I love that you're highlighting the up and comers and giving the youngins their due. So now, Steve, you recently finished a massive lift with what is called Spring Restaurant Week. And can you just kind of share with our audience, what is the purpose of Restaurant Week? And then maybe if you have any just high level numbers, info, just, what you want them to know. And I'm going to have a follow up because there is also a fall week. So I just kind of want to hear some of the differences because I know those are two large events and events that many, many people look forward to every year.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, I want to share a personal story with you because we didn't know what we were going to do with Restaurant Week. Is Fall Restaurant Week is in its 17th year this year. And it was something that other states toyed with and weren't successful with. And we kept it. American Express came to me 4 times and I kept saying, no, we're not ready for a restaurant week in Arizona. This is in the early 2000s. And then finally we said yes. And I'll never forget my oldest son now, who's a sophomore in college, I was taking him to kindergarten and it was a Friday. And he said, Dad, I've got a headache. And I said, sweetheart, you're too young. You don't know what a headache is. And his teacher said, Grant, you can't have a headache. It's Friday, and most importantly, it's the start of restaurant week. And I said, what did you just say? And then another mom comes in and says, oh my gosh, where are you going for restaurant week? And, it's as though, Tim, the clouds parted, the sun came through, and restaurant week was established, right? And so it has become its own entity now, which is something that is very, very good. We've got one of the longest association-owned restaurant weeks in the country. Then we came up with this idea, do we do spring as well? And I had a few restaurateurs come to me and said, we want to do this. I said, we're not ready for it. They said, you have to do it. And, I serve at the pleasure of our members. And so even though I was not in favor of it, I agreed to it. And our first spring restaurant week had 20 restaurants, 20 or 25. This spring restaurant week had 200, right?
Wow.
And so then both weeks have been incredibly successful. To your point, Spring Restaurant Week in 2024 was the largest participating restaurant week we've ever had, and probably one of the most successful restaurant weeks we've ever had. So we're very grateful for that. Fall is lining up to be the very same, Tim. And in addition to that, people love trying new things, and this is your opportunity to do that. But it's it's several $100,000. I mean, we spend over $100,000 each time in putting this together. And you've got to make sure you are careful that, hey, just because this has been a great golden goose, we tear it down every year and market it differently and make sure that we're doing the best we can for our restaurateurs and for the consumer. And we do that in a couple of ways. We've only raised prices for Restaurant Week in a 17-year career twice. So we've kept them at bay. You could really say 1.5 because we didn't increase all the prices. So we love it. The what we call the foodies in Arizona love it, and I'm glad you brought it up.
And now, Steve, can you kind of explain? I know every restaurant, they usually do some kind of three-course meal or some kind of options. Like what are kind of the availabilities there amongst the restaurants? Just give a couple examples.
So the whole idea is to drive volume and also to showcase things that we've just been talking about the past few minutes. About what Arizona has to offer our consumers and our guests each and every day. And so you've got 3 price points, essentially, 33, 44, or 55. And that ranges from your casual dining restaurants to your fine dining restaurants, right? And it's a prefix menu where you get an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert, all for one of those numbers. Now, in some cases, Tim, at 33, they might offer cocktails to join that, or they might offer couples dining. So restaurateurs are entrepreneurs by heart, and they'll be as creative as they can be. And so you get exceptional value for what you are paying. And that's the idea. And it's to say, hey, look, we are the beneficiary of discretionary income. You're going to make your car payment, your mortgage payment, your rent payment, whatever comes first, your kids' needs, your household needs first. And then it comes down to us and gasoline and some of these other niceties, right? So it's expensive to dine out. Well, I'm not going to kid you. I'm the head of the industry, and I think it's not gotten cheaper. It's gotten expensive. I understand our costs have gone up. I understand the inflationary pressures. But all that considered, people don't have as much discretionary income than they maybe once did during these tough inflationary times. And so we want to make it easier for them and more affordable, more importantly, to go out and to try a restaurant that they may not want to take a gamble on and feel as though, oh my gosh, I just wasted money. And that's the other part of it. It's the less discussed or talked about part, but certainly a part of why we do restaurant.
Good overview there, Steve. I appreciate it. Now, I want to take it a little bigger picture. I don't want to put you on the spot. I know it's like saying which one of your kids do you love the best, which you would never say. However, you, the man, the head of the table, what are just a couple of your favorite restaurants? Could be big, small, fancy or not. What are just a few that when it's time for the Chucri family to go get some grub, what's a couple of your go-tos?
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny. I always answer this question with all 12,590 restaurants in the state are my favorites, right? But
smart answer.
In the business, Tim, I remember when I first started here, I was only, I think, 30 years old when I started this job, and I would go with restaurateurs and we'd be traveling to conferences and we'd sit down and they would pick apart the restaurant and say what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. And I said, it's like work going to dine with you guys. I'll never want to do that. And guess what happened 23 years later, Tim? I'm picking restaurants apart. And so when we view from my side, we're looking at execution, we're looking at food quality, we're looking at consistency, we're looking at atmosphere, we're looking at all those things, not just flavor. I think when you ask someone what's your favorite restaurant, they're going to tell you whatever their favorite flavor is. When we look at it from an industry-based standpoint, we look at all those factors I just mentioned, and I'll tell you, look, I think the Hillstone Group does it well. I think the Mastro family does it well. I think Sam Fox does it well. I think a lot of independents like Chris Collins. I love. It's not too far from you, and I know you like Mexican food. If you go off of 24th and McDowell, Rositas, I think that's some of the best Mexican,
Oh yeah.
right, that you can get. And so it's not all those where you raise your pinky and drink from a teacup. It's really those restaurateurs who work hard. God bless her, Barrio Cafe. I think Savannah did a wonderful job with what she had to offer and her culinary opportunities and talent. So, and we've got some great new entrants coming in. You know, Jennifer's is another. She's a chef-driven restaurant, and she does a good job. So, you know, we look at the consistency, we look at all those important factors which really keep a restaurant going. But those are some of my favorites. I love, of course, you know, the Capital Grills of the world and the Buck and Riders and others. I've invested in some of these restaurants too, so I want to be careful. But I do that because I want to invest in the industry I've come to love. And I think that provides so much opportunity to so many in our state.
Absolutely. So kind of a final question here, and, you know, this is really your time. You know, what does, from your position, obviously, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for the Arizona restaurant scene, and anything you'd like to highlight? Obviously, you know, due to your good work when you're at the county and what we're doing here, lots of people are still moving here. Lots of great companies, international companies are coming here. And so, you know, we've seen a few months ago, we interviewed Mayor Giles with the Asian district and kind of highlighted Mekong and, you know, some of these more cultural centers. But, you know, what is the 5 to 10 year outlook for you and your organization look like, and any goals over that time period?
You know, I think it's actually a simple question, yet I mean a simple answer, but yet multifaceted in that things aren't getting any easier. To build a restaurant today, if you're going to do it right, you're looking at $6.5 million for a full service restaurant. You're looking at 3.5 for a fast casual restaurant, which is really expensive. And so what I foresee happening going forward, and what I have seen happen, is that we've been on this treadmill, Tim, and the treadmill gets faster and faster. I don't know if you've ever had a heart test when they keep upping the percentage of the not only the speed, but how quickly and how high the elevation is of the treadmill. And I think the industry is kind of on a treadmill that continues to get faster because we're changing so quickly as an industry through technology. But moreover, that yes, we've been great beneficiaries of growth in the state, thanks to GPEC and you and others and governors of our state and the legislature. But we've also got more competitive, right? So how do you stand out from your competitor? And I think you're going to see more and more technology, Tim, in the back of the house. I can show you restaurants now that have robotic arms that are cooking your French fries. Chipotle, which everyone knows by name, has Chippy, who makes chips, right? He's a robot that makes chips. They've got Otto Cabo, who can skin avocados 50% faster than a human, right? All it takes is oil, no scheduling, no time off. And so we are the industry of hospitality, not hostility. I want to make sure I express that, because we need our people, right? But when you see kiosks and when you see these other forms of technology, when you go through a drive-through in the next 2 years, it will not be a human talking to you. You'll think it is, but it's going to be AI technology, right? And so I see technology being a huge driver in trying to keep the economies of scale of our industry in line with our growth and with inflation and all the other inflationary pressures we see on a daily basis, whether it's commodity-based, wage-based, real estate-based, you name it, right? So I see that being a huge play. I also think that you're going to hopefully see soon, as we're working with your Convention and Visitors Bureau there in Phoenix, to get Michelin status to the state of Arizona. I think we're very worthy of that. I think you'll see still an influx of outside talent of chefs and restaurants coming in, wanting to come to Arizona. I mean, our weather is great. Now, yes, it's hot, it's June. But I believe those are the primary factors you'll see. You'll see more talent coming in here. You'll see a heck of a lot more technology. And I think you'll see competition get stronger and stronger.
Great response. And again, Steve, we so appreciate you making the time for us, your extended GPEC family, and providing our listeners with that view. Again, GPEC has shifted in the last few years. Obviously, business attraction is still important, but it's that sense of community, arts, culture, restaurants. That's what makes life. That's where people want to move to, and you have been a staple in that. And again, on behalf of the GPEC family and all the folks that have moved here, we appreciate you. And again, sir, thank you so much for making the time for our podcast today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, for not kicking me out of the GPEC family.
Always. Once again, thank you, Steve Chucri, for joining us on the Greater Phoenix A to Z podcast, and thank you, the listener, for tuning in. Do me and our guest a favor and be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. Also, if you're so inclined, please rate us 5 stars and leave a comment. To keep up with what's happening in Greater Phoenix, follow GPEC at Greater Phoenix on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Until next time, be safe and well. Cheers.